no government ever really pays back all its debt. And sometimes people are usually like so adamant and focused on the amount of public debt as opposed to how that debt is structured and how much of the government revenue it's eating up. So today we're going to look at the reasons why governments never pay back debt and why they can have like very high debt like since forever and up to forever. And we're also going to look at when we should really be concerned about when a country is in debt and also why some countries collapse because of debt. So let's get started with why does a country or government need to borrow money in the first place? The first thing is that government has plans to spend, and that plan to spend is often larger than the income of the government, right? So when the expenditure is much greater than the money brought in, there's a bit of a problem, and the government has to get that money from elsewhere because it can't just like raise the taxes without causing problems with the people. So what it does is that it either prints money or it borrows money from its citizens or it borrows money from outside the country. Depending on the circumstances, those options are preferable under some circumstances as opposed to other circumstances. So there we have when the spending is much greater than the income from the government issues what we call bonds, government bonds. In most countries they're called bonds. In the US they're called treasury bonds or treasury bills. Okay, so basically all of them, they basically the same thing. They're debts that the government takes on in order to cater for its spending. So government borrows money and then promises to pay the holder of the bond a certain interest rate. Maybe if it's 10% interest and the bond is worth $1,000, then the government will pay $100 every year to the holder of that bond. So a lot of times you find that the government has a much greater debt that's due to be paid. For example, let's say that the US government, for example, has about $10 trillion due this year in terms of paying back the investors that had borrowed money from some time ago. So where does it get that money? Because in the first place, the tax revenue is not enough even to cover, because for the US the tax revenue is about $5 trillion, the expenditure is about $7 trillion, so there's a deficit of $2 trillion, and we're not in the spending, we're not even talking about the amount of debt that is due. So where does the government get the money for paying back that $10 trillion? Because it's not accounted for in the expenditure in the government budget. So what government does in that case is that it goes back to the bond market, right? It goes and tells buyers of bonds, what you're going to do is that you give us the $10 trillion, okay, and then you're going to pay in the coming years, you're going to pay that back. So government needs money for two things, needs to borrow money for two things. One is to cater for the difference between spending and expenditure, and two, it needs to clear the outstanding debt that's due this year. The second operation is what we call a rollover operation. So government needs to borrow enough to cater for the deficit, which is the difference between expenditure and spending, and the rollover. Every government on earth, from the United States to Kenya to Australia basically has to do these two operations, and often you'll find that the rollover is massively, it's very massive, it's often massive than the deficit. Okay, so here is where the mechanics of borrowing gets really tricky, because for one, you see that interest rate we talked about, that's 10%. If that interest rate is very small, then it means that the government will pay back less money in the future. If the interest is very high, it means that future governments will find it hard to pay back the debt. And that's why sometimes you find governments that are nearing election time, they tend to borrow much more in order to build infrastructure and spend, so that people are excited and they try and vote them back again, which is like a very bad thing, since it punishes future generations with a higher debt load. This happens all over the country whenever there's a democratic election. So sometimes you find that if the interest rates are low, the bond buyers won't people won't be like motivated to buy the bonds, right? You find that if the bond is paying you like 2%, and yet you can get the same 2% by investing, let's say, in a business, or let's say in investing in another country which has higher interest rates, that small rate might be insufficient to attract bond buyers. So in such a situation, the government usually has two options to consider. One, raise the interest rates so that they are more attractive, so that buyers don't go to other countries or do investments like stocks. Gold doesn't pay interest, so that may not be a competitor here. So it may be something like money market funds, fixed income funds, stocks. Those are competing with bonds, right? And they're usually competing more so when interest rates are low, because low interest rates often have a very appreciating effect on stocks. That is, when interest rates go low, in general, that will cause the bonds, the money, people to get their money from bonds and into the stocks. But that's not the main point. The main point is that the government has this situation whereby the interest rates are low. Okay, low interest rates mean that people don't desire that bond so much. So what do? The government raises interest rates in order to make the bonds more attractive. But interest rates have a very strong effect on the economy. If you remember that how we tackle inflation is by raising interest rates, but raising interest rates has the effect of making economic activity slow down. Why? Because if we increase interest rates, we increase the cost of borrowing. So businesses have less incentive for borrowing, and what they end up doing is they scale back on growth, and there's less economic growth. So the government is usually at a very hard place, right? Because more growth usually means more employment and more stimulation in the economy. So when interest rates are raised, that decreases the growth, it decreases employment, it makes economic conditions very painful. And those are not things that governments, especially in their later, just near the elections, tend to do. So they tend to favor an easy policy so that people feel that there is money in the economy and conditions are easy. So that is usually a very hard thing to consider, raising interest rates. So let's say that the government went out to the US government. Remember, it has a $10 trillion outstanding debt that it has to clear this year, right? So it needs to borrow $10 trillion. Yeah, you see that. So let's say that with the current interest rates, it goes to the bond market and the amount of investments, the amount of buyers aren't enough to cover the $10 trillion. What do? What they do is that they the central bank of the US, in this case the Fed, will print money and indirectly cover up the amount that needs covering up. So basically a lot of printing of money happens. Okay, it's not legal for the Fed to print money and then buy the bonds directly from the government. So what they do is that they perform an operation through the banks. So they print money, and then the banks will sell the bonds that they hold. So bonds from previous issues, from previous years that they had bought previously, banks will give that, and then the bank will now have money enough to buy bonds from the government, right? So there's an indirect operation happening, but the effect is effectively the same as just the Fed buying up all the central bank or all the treasury bonds. Only that when it does that indirectly, there's more scrutiny, and it is well scrutinized by those who are buying bonds. So there's more oversight there. So essentially, we have here the situation whereby interest rates are not sufficient enough to attract buyers. So the government does, through the Fed, will print money, and then that money will be used for covering up the outstanding debt. And remember that there being a lot of money in the economy will stimulate the economy, and a lot of the money might go back into buying bonds and buying stocks. So there must be a few unintended consequences of this, like those with money having more assets, or there being inflation, so inflation might increase. So the government needs to take care that these effects balance each other out. If you'd like to see a more intense case of this, where government borrowing nearly just challenges all logic, look at the case for Japan. Japan has the highest interest rates, has the lowest interest rate, almost the lowest interest rates in the world. Thus has the highest GDP to debt to GDP ratio. If you want to check the case, how that came about, you can check this video.